Have you ever sat across from someone you deeply care about, looked into their eyes and felt like something was missing, but you couldn't quite put your finger on it? Maybe it's a longtime partner. Maybe it's someone you've shared decades with. You still share a home, still speak every day, but lately, something's different. It's quieter, less warm, less familiar. If you've ever felt that subtle shift, you're not imagining it, and you're certainly not alone. As we get older, one of the things we value the most is emotional closeness. At this stage of life, connection matters more than ever. We want to be seen, heard, and appreciated, not just out of habit but from the heart. So when someone starts pulling away, even emotionally, it doesn't just confuse us, it hurts. Not always loudly. Sometimes it just settles in like a quiet ache in the background of everyday life. That's why today, I want to talk to you about something that's both delicate and important. The early signs someone no longer loves you and is beginning to pull away emotionally. These signs don't usually arrive like a thunderstorm. They drift in like a fog, soft, subtle, but they change everything. And if you can recognize these signs early, you give yourself a chance to understand, to heal, to make choices that honor your peace. Let's begin with one of the first and perhaps most painful signs they stop sharing the little things. It's not always dramatic. There's no slam door, no big announcement, but the daily conversations begin to shrink. You notice it when they walk into the room and no longer mention how their day went. They used to tell you what they ate for lunch, who they bumped into at the store, or how something on the news made them feel. Now they sit in silence or offer a brief nod before moving on. It's not that they're busy, they just aren't offering themselves to you anymore. And it may leave you wondering, did I do something wrong? But more often than not, it's not about one mistake or one moment. When love begins to fade, the desire to connect, even in small, ordinary ways, starts to disappear too. They might still answer your questions, but they don't volunteer anything. They no longer invite you into their inner world. And it feels like you're standing just outside a house you once lived in. This can be especially confusing because everything else might still seem normal. The routine continues. Dinner is still served. The TV is still on. But that warmth, that spark, that mutual curiosity, it's gone. And when you try to bring it back, maybe they brush you off or act like you're imagining things. But trust yourself. If you feel emotionally shut out, there's a reason. Emotional distance doesn't need loud arguments to be real. It can exist quietly and still change everything. Now another sign to pay close attention to is when affection becomes forced or disappears altogether. This isn't just about physical intimacy. It's about the small gestures that used to come so naturally. A gentle hand on your back while you're cooking, a kiss on the forehead before bed, even just holding your hand while walking to the car. These moments matter, especially in long-term relationships. They're the quiet ways we say, I see you. I care about you. I want to be near you. But when someone is emotionally pulling away, those gestures often vanish. You start to notice the hugs feel half-hearted. The kisses are rushed or skipped altogether. The warmth in their voice starts to fade. It might feel like they're going through the motions, or not even trying anymore. And if you bring it up, they might say things like, I'm just tired, or it's nothing, or worse, you're overthinking. But your heart knows better. Because you remember how things used to feel. You remember when they used to reach for your hand first. You remember when they smiled with their eyes, not just their mouth. And now, they barely look up when you enter the room. This change in affection can be one of the clearest indicators that something deeper is shifting. It's not about needing constant romance or dramatic gestures. It's about being valued, feeling loved, feeling chosen. Even now, even after all these years. And if you're someone who grew up in a time where emotions weren't always openly discussed, this kind of change can be hard to name. You might try to dismiss it or tell yourself it's just a phase. But when it lasts, and you keep feeling less seen, less held, and less important, it deserves your attention. Sometimes the hardest part about noticing these signs is the hope that maybe things will just go back to how they were. You tell yourself, maybe they're just stressed. Or maybe I'm expecting too much. But emotional distance rarely fixes itself without being acknowledged. And waiting in silence can feel lonelier than being alone. Now I want you to pause and take a deep breath with me. This isn't about blame. It's not about labeling someone as the bad guy. It's about recognizing when your emotional needs are no longer being met. It's about honoring what your heart is quietly telling you. You've spent decades caring for others. You've carried families, jobs, responsibilities, and disappointments. You've weathered storms and stayed strong. So now you deserve relationships that feel emotionally safe and fulfilling. If these signs sound familiar, don't be afraid to say so. You're not weak for noticing. You're not dramatic for feeling. You're wise, you're self-aware, and you're ready to make space for honesty in your life. Let's keep going deeper into this, because emotional disconnection doesn't stop at small talk and affection. It often shows up in even more subtle ways, ways that might surprise you. One of those ways is when you stop being their go-to person. Think back to a time when they used to come to you for advice, whether it was something big, like making a financial decision, or something small, like what to wear to a dinner. They wanted your input. They cared what you thought. Your opinion mattered to them, and you felt like a team. That kind of closeness, where you turn to each other first, is the heartbeat of emotional connection. But now, they don't ask anymore. You find out things after they've already made a choice. You hear about plans they've made from someone else. And when you do ask, the answers are short, almost dismissive, like they've already moved on in their mind. And you're playing catch-up. It's a subtle shift, but a powerful one. When someone is emotionally pulling away, they begin to build a private world without you in it. It's not always intentional, and they might not even realize they're doing it. But over time, it creates a wall. You start feeling like an outsider in a relationship that used to feel like home. This one stings, especially for those of us who grew up believing relationships were about partnership, about helping each other through life, leaning on each other, trusting each other with the little and the big things. So when that connection breaks, it leaves behind a silence that feels heavier than any argument ever could. Maybe you've tried to ask, "Why didn't you tell me?" Or "Why didn't you ask me what I thought?" And maybe they brush it off with, "Oh, I didn't think it was important," or "I just handled it." But the message beneath those words is what really hurts. You're no longer the one I turn to. If that sounds familiar, please know, you are not invisible. You're not unimportant. And just because someone stops seeing your value doesn't mean it disappeared. You still have insight, wisdom, and experience to offer. And if someone no longer sees that, it's a reflection of where they are emotionally, not a reflection of your worth. Another sign that's just as painful, but even harder to put into words, is when they stop noticing what makes you happy. This isn't about grand gestures. It's not about buying flowers or planning surprises. It's about attention. It's about how they used to remember the way you like your tea, or how you always turn the TV down during commercials. They notice the small things that made your day smoother, your heart lighter, and they made an effort to show they cared. That kind of love is quiet, but it's powerful. But now, they walk right past those details. They don't ask how your doctor's visit went. They forget your preferences, your habits, your moods. They may still be physically present, but emotionally, they've gone somewhere else. And deep down, you can feel it. You might try to convince yourself it's just age, or stress, or forgetfulness. And yes, those things can be part of it. But when it becomes a pattern, when their attention shifts away from what lights you up and what brings you comfort, it becomes more than forgetfulness. It becomes a sign. Because love pays attention, it doesn't need to be perfect, but it does need to be thoughtful. And when someone stops noticing what makes you feel good, or worse, stops caring if you're unhappy, that's emotional distance in its rawest form. I've heard stories from people who say, "He used to know when something was bothering me, before I even said a word. Now I could be crying quietly in the next room, and he wouldn't even notice." That kind of change doesn't just happen overnight. It builds over time. A missed smile here, a forgotten question there. Eventually you realize you're no longer seen in the way you once were, and you begin to ask yourself questions you never thought you'd ask. Does he still care? Am I still lovable? Is it wrong to want more? No, it's not wrong. It's human. Let's take a moment and pause here. If your heart feels heavy right now, it's because these things matter. Emotional connection is not a luxury in a relationship. It's the foundation. And when that starts to crumble, it's okay to feel confused, hurt, or even scared. Especially if you've invested your whole life into this bond, only to feel it slipping through your fingers day by day. But here's what I want to remind you. You still matter. Your emotions are valid. Your needs are real. And your capacity for love and joy is still very much alive, no matter what someone else forgets to see in you. This stage of life is not the end of your emotional story. It's not too late to have hard conversations. It's not too late to ask for what you deserve. And it's certainly not too late to find peace, whether that's within the relationship or beyond it. As we keep going, we'll explore how emotional distance can show up in other quiet but telling ways, especially the kind that leave you feeling like a burden rather than a blessing. And if that's something you've been feeling lately, I want you to stay with me. It's when you start to feel like a burden. This feeling doesn't usually come from one big event. It builds over time through small interactions that chip away at your sense of worth. Maybe it's the sigh when you ask a question, the eye roll when you forget something, the impatience in their voice when you share a story you've already told once before. It's subtle, but it stings. And before long, you start second-guessing yourself. You stop asking for help. You hold back your thoughts, your worries, your needs, not because you don't have them, but because you've been made to feel like they're too much. Like you're too much. No one should ever feel like that in a relationship, especially not someone who spent years giving, loving, sacrificing. You've earned the right to be seen, to be listened to be cherished, not just tolerated. But when emotional closeness fades, people stop treating each other as partners. You might still be in the same room, but you no longer feel like equals. They get irritated more quickly. They seem to have less patience, less kindness. They stop asking how your day was, and if you try to talk about your feelings, you might hear things like, "Can we not do this right now?" Or "Why are you always so emotional lately?" That response, whether it's cold, dismissive, or defensive, teaches you to stay quiet, and staying quiet becomes a habit, a lonely one. What's heartbreaking is that many people, especially older adults, convince themselves this is normal. They think, well, we've been together a long time. Maybe this is just how things go now, but it doesn't have to be. And it shouldn't be. You are not a burden for having emotions. You are not a burden for wanting to feel close. You are not asking for too much when you ask to be treated with respect and care. Wanting to feel connected to the person you share your life with is not a weakness. It's human. It's healthy. And if someone makes you feel like your presence is more of a problem than a gift, that's not love. That's emotional withdrawal. Whether they realize they're doing it or not, the impact is the same. It hurts. It confuses. And isolates. Now maybe you're sitting there thinking, but we've built a life together. We've shared so much history. Maybe it's just the years catching up with us. And yes, time does change how relationships feel. The passionate spark of youth turns into the quieter rhythm of companionship. That's normal. But emotional care, emotional respect, that shouldn't fade. In fact, it should deepen. At this stage in life, love isn't about fireworks. It's about presence, gentleness, a soft voice when you need comfort, a steady hand when you feel uncertain, someone who still looks at you with kindness, even on the ordinary days. So if that's gone, if you're made to feel like your needs are an inconvenience, it's time to take a step back and ask yourself some honest questions, not out of bitterness, not out of anger, but out of love for yourself. Am I being emotionally supported? Do I feel safe sharing my heart with this person? Or have I slowly learned to keep things inside because it feels easier than being dismissed? It's never too late to notice what you've been ignoring, and it's never too late to ask for better, not just from others, but from yourself. Because part of emotional healing is recognizing that you deserve more than what you've been settling for. Maybe for a long time, you told yourself it would get better, that if you just tried harder or stayed quiet a little longer, things would return to how they used to be. And maybe they haven't. Maybe they've only gotten more distant. That's not your fault. You cannot carry a relationship on your own. You cannot do the emotional work for both people. You cannot love someone into loving you again. It has to be mutual, consistent, real. And I know, It's frightening to admit when something you built your life around is no longer giving back to you. But clarity is not the enemy. Clarity is a form of peace, and from peace you can move forward. Whether that means having a brave conversation with your partner, or simply beginning to honor your own feelings again. There's no shame in wanting closeness, no shame in feeling lonely, and certainly no shame in saying, I need more than this. You've come this far in life. You've raised families, built homes, overcome hardships. You've seen the world change again and again. You've adapted, you've grown, and now you still deserve warmth. You still deserve kindness. You still deserve to be loved with care and intention. Let's sit with that truth for a moment. Because it matters, you matter. And as we continue, I want you to know this conversation isn't meant to bring sadness. It's meant to bring awareness, strength, clarity. Because when we name what hurts, we give ourselves the power to heal. And that's exactly what you're doing right now, giving yourself permission to see clearly. And that final sign, the one that's often the hardest to accept, it's something we'll need to talk about gently but honestly. So let's take a deep breath and keep going, together.